Well, today is the sixth and final day of the truce between Israel and Hamas, with talks underway for another possible extension. Over 15,000 people have been killed in over a month of fighting and attacks on the Gaza Strip. It's after Hamas attacked the south of Israel in early October, killing about 1,200 people and taking more than 200 hostages. Now, the truce offers the opportunity to get much-needed aid into Gaza. For more on this, let's speak to the co-founder and general manager of Humanitarian Aid, Consultation and Solutions, Shameema Kolia. Shameema, a very good evening to you. Good to talk to you. And as we come to you tonight, you're in fact in a warehouse, and am I right, the goods behind you are part of the help destined to Palestinians who've been waiting and suffering for over a month now.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, we're in a warehouse here in Cairo. You can see it's a hive of activity, so I do apologize for the noise behind us. But, you know, aid needs to go in, and all of the people are packing here. So this is the food packs that are being packed here, which will get loaded onto the trucks and go into Gaza.
And what sort of food are you sending to Gaza, considering that some parts of the Gaza Strip have no electricity, so storing, for example, fresh produce may be difficult, etc.? What is best to send in?
Absolutely. So the packs are contained of mainly non-perishable food items, things that are really easy to access and eat. So we've got things like cheese in there, cheese spreads that can be put onto bread and eaten immediately, and something that is also part of the Palestinian diet. We've got things like halawa, which is made out of sesame paste and sugar. Those are important things because they're obviously nutritious. They're in the palate of the Palestinian people and also makes it easy to actually eat. It's got water in every food pack because I think that that's really important with access to water being an issue in Gaza itself. There's also things like pasta, rice, and all of the staples that people can use immediately. You know, food packs are put into, it's about 8.5 kilos for every food pack that we are putting together. So it makes it easy for families to actually take a food pack and walk on. So many men have been affected in the crisis, and it's women and children and those who've been wounded through this. So it needs to be easy access to be able to pick that up and take that away with them.
You mentioned easy access. How are you getting this food into Gaza at the moment?
So what we're doing is we're packing inside of Cairo. It just means that we're away from the congestion in the border. So the food is packed here and loaded onto trucks. Those trucks then drive to the Rafah border. They go to Al-Arish, which is about 30 kilometers from the border. They then go to another border, which is controlled by the Israelis for Al-Oja. There, everything is verified, checked, and then given the permission to enter through the Rafah crossing. And that's how we're doing it currently.
And if the ceasefire is not extended tonight, the final day of the ceasefire, what will that mean for your ability to help the thousands, hundreds of thousands, in fact, of destitute Palestinians?
Look, the impact is going to be significant. In general, long before this crisis started, Gaza is actually landlocked and sea-locked, and getting aid into it with 50% of the population relying on international aid. It means that access is so important. So with the ceasefire, if it doesn't actually continue, it means so much less is going to go in. From October 7th, you know, we had very little trucks entering into the Rafah border. But with the ceasefire, that's helped immensely. We're seeing about 200 trucks go in every day, and it means that aid's getting in. In the last couple of days, also, the northern parts of Gaza has had trucks going in. 31 trucks were able to go in. And in the first 3 weeks of this crisis, and about 1.7 million people moving from the north into the south, there was not actually access of any international aid. So meaning that if that goes through now, you know, there's at least some reprieve for the people.
And still on access, you were mentioning earlier that it is quite a process, in fact, to get supplies into Gaza, because once they leave your warehouse, even getting to the hands of the Palestinians who need food. For example, the Israelis need to check what is in all of those boxes. What are they checking for, and on what grounds, for example, would the goods be turned back or denied entry into Gaza?
Yes. So what they're obviously checking for is every truck that is packed has a packing list, verifying exactly what's in it. Food items, medical items, winter kits. They need to obviously check that the packing list matches what's in the trucks, and based on that, they either let it through or not. In terms of the internal processes of what they allow, and I can't really speak to that, but, you know, we're sending medical aid, medical equipment, and food, which is essential right now. We're getting updated lists all the time from the Ministry of Health inside of Gaza to tell us what medicines are needed, what medical equipment is needed. And even with our food, we're taking that information directly from the Palestinian Red Crescent, who have access to those most in need in Gaza. So we're trying to accommodate in that respect. And that's how the trucks have been going through. But again, at the end of the day, it has to be verified and checked.
And how well does that system work, the coordination system and indeed the checks themselves? Because as you're saying, what you ultimately want to do is help the people who are waiting on the other side because they no longer have shops. Things like bakeries have also been damaged in the Israeli bombardment of Gaza.
Absolutely. It's a mammoth task. And we've got, agencies from all over the world working to try and coordinate these efforts and get the aid to the most in need. We've seen trucks of flour go through in the last couple of days with help with just essentials like bread and things, which is really important. We're trying to take as much advantage as we can of the ceasefire, and we're hoping that it continues. And this is the end to this so that we can actually get much more aid into Gaza. It is needed. But the coordination is with the Egyptian Red Crescent here on the Egypt side and then the Palestinian Red Crescent on the other side. So as long as we're working through those authorities and working within those systems and the boundaries and limitations, we're trying to do our best.
And do you know how many people you've been able to reach, Shameema?
So we can't tell you exact numbers because once the food actually gets in, it is distributed by the Palestinian Red Crescent. Family numbers vary of who's actually getting it. But we know that it's nowhere near what's needed, right? If we actually think about the population of 2.2 million, over 12,000 dead, over 30,000 injured, and that's just numbers that we know about. There's so many unofficial numbers. There's no access to proper medical hospitals. There's no food going in. So the need is well beyond what we're talking about. Prior to this crisis, we were looking at sometimes 100 to 400 trucks of aid going in every day, into Gaza. We're talking about billions of aid every year going into it just to sustain the people. So if we think of that number being so less now, we know that they're not actually getting what they need, and people need a lot more given what's actually happened to them.
And you made an important point about the need for medical supplies to get into Gaza, more medical supplies to get into Gaza, because more than half the hospitals in the Gaza Strip are barely operational. In fact, many have shut down. But the WHO just around this time yesterday was warning that, in fact, most Palestinians in Gaza at this point are at greater risk of dying from disease potentially than the bombs.
That's exactly right. We have to think of what that situation looks like on the ground with no access to sanitation, no rubbish being picked up off the streets, no clean water to drink. These are all going to impact the health of the Gazan people. And that is the reality. It goes well beyond just the bombs dropping, and this issue is going to last even if we have a continuous ceasefire. It is virtually impossible to be able to protect people from that. And it's also winter. I'm in Egypt on this side, and I can tell you that I'm wearing layers. It's really cold. It's exactly the same temperature right now in Gaza, and people don't have anything. So we can imagine what that situation actually looks like, what we have ahead of us as an international community to be able to make a difference and a change to them.
You mentioned the cold. It's also been raining in Gaza this week. Give us an idea for people who are not familiar with the region and what the weather's like at this time of year. How cold can it get? How inclement is the weather in Gaza and the Egypt region at this time of year? And how big of a threat would it pose to people who basically are sheltering beneath the ruins of their homes or outside hospitals?
Look, I can tell you right now it's about 15 degrees here. At night, the temperature drops severely. With the rain and no shelter and no clothing, none of the things that we have to keep us warm. And Gaza has no fuel right now. So how do people actually keep warm? How do we keep the colds and the flus away? It is actually impossible. This is just the start of winter, though. We haven't even reached the harsher times, and we're getting to that. December and January ends up the temperature drops much more significantly. How are we going to be able to protect people? Today you can actually see food here in the warehouse, but we're doing things like blankets and tents. We're seeking permission to be able to build tent cities just to be able to get the people through winter, because otherwise we're going to see a lot more lives lost just with the harsh weather conditions.
And Shameema, just lastly, I'm not sure if this will work. Pardon me, and let me know if it won't. I wonder if you could give us just a better shot, if you will, an idea of what's going on in the warehouse? Show us around if you can.
Yes, of course. So I'll show you. I'm going to just explain to Amir's holding camera. We just want to show the people exactly what's happening in the warehouse. I'll take you through to show you just the food boxes and what's actually going in. So this is the start of the packing. Our warehouse is actually operating now 24 hours a day. We're working on 3 shifts and we've just started a new shift. So you can see that all of the food items are packed along the wall, and we're putting in things like water and flour. We're packing in each warehouse about 4,000 food packs a day. To that side of me, we've got medicine being stored. So we're doing pallets and boxes that go into the truck. Each truck takes about 22 pallets of goods. We're doing about 20 of food, and then we're doing 2 pallets of medicine. As I explained to you earlier on, most of that medicine is actually given to us by the Ministry of Health of what's needed. At the moment, the children is something that we're all concerned about. Things like just calcium, vitamin D, these are actually essential, because if you're not getting any of that nutrition, and if we want to be able to keep disease away and keep them healthy through the harsher months, it's what's needed. So it's the essential stuff that we're trying to get through.
Shameema Kolia, really good
Outside,
to speak to you.
I'm sure we can see our trucks and stuff. So, they'll all be packed tonight and then across the border tomorrow.
Shameema Kolia, really good to speak to you from Cairo in Egypt, where
thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much. Part of the aid effort is underway, as you can imagine, on the last day, Kathy, of that ceasefire. Yeah. Just people doing their best to make sure that supplies as simple as non-perishable food, canned food, as we'd call it in South Africa, is able to get to, especially those children, man, those hundreds of thousands of children who are hungry at this moment.